Hi, everybody. Danny Bader here, and welcome to another episode of our Back to Life podcast, Season 2, Episode 17, with Bill Bennett, a new friend of mine that I am very, very happy I got to meet. Another friend of mine said, you got to meet this guy, Bill Bennett. So I went onto his website and checked it out. Bill's an Australian guy, and he's been around making films and writing books and producing things for over 30 years. He's got a great book out called The Way, My Way, which is a book about his journey walking the El Camino Trail, which is really, really good if that's something that would be interesting to you. My friend told me, you got to meet this guy, Bill Bennett. So I went on and I checked out his website, and in there I watched a trailer for a movie, a documentary that he did, and we'll talk about it, called Intuition, PGS, and PGS stands for your personal guidance system. It comes out of a story a number of years ago. Bill was riding to the airport early in the morning to catch a flight, and he's approaching a green light, and he hears slow down. And he's like, what, that's weird. And he kind of keeps going. He starts to accelerate so he can make it through the green light, and hears the voice more intently say, slow down. And he does. He puts his feet on the brakes, and instantly right then, a tractor trailer runs the red light and comes flying through the intersection that he said would have ended his life. He went, he was shook up, and he went about it, and got onto the flight and just stayed with him. So he put together a wonderful documentary on this thing called Intuition. And I think you're going to enjoy our conversation about it because, as he said, it's something that we all have and that we all want to pay attention to. So enjoy the episode. Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to our episode. You heard when I did the intro here about our guest, Bill Bennett, and I'm very excited. So, Bill, thanks a lot for being with us.
Absolute pleasure, Danny.
Yeah. Now let's jump right into it. So when you and I were introduced by our friend Heather, she said, you guys have to meet one another. And we jumped on a Zoom call. I was in Pennsylvania. You were in Australia. And I think we had a pretty easy conversation about life and some of its interesting twists and turns. So tell us, you heard a voice and you say it saved your life. What is that all about?
This goes back now quite a few years. I'm a film director, and I was actually working on a movie in New Orleans at the time. I was driving out of New Orleans to the airport early one morning. It was before dawn, it was dark. And I was approaching an intersection. There was a green light up ahead. I went to accelerate to make sure that I got through on the green light. Mm-hmm. And I heard a voice which said, slow down, which was weird because I'd never heard a voice before. I'd never heard anything. And there was no reason to slow down. Like, all the roads were empty. It was dark. It just made no sense. Anyway, so I went to accelerate again. The voice came in a second time, slow down. And I thought, this is just too weird. And so I braked. I started to slow down. As I entered the intersection, a massive truck ran a red light on the cross street, barreled through the intersection. I then slammed on the brakes and just avoided getting hit. And, the truck just hurtled past. And then I got to the other side of the intersection and I pulled over, and I was shaking, with adrenaline because
I'm sure
because that truck would have killed me. Yeah. Had that voice not told me to slow down. More importantly, had I not listened to that voice and acted on it. Mm.
So then what happens after that? You pull over, you kind of get your senses back, take a deep breath and get on your way. Mm-hmm. Was that lurking with you, after that time?
What happened was, so I sat there in the car on the side of the road. I really couldn't kind of drive because I was really shaken up so much because it was that close.
Yeah.
And I thought, three questions came to mind. What was that voice? Where did it come from? And why did it save my life? And those three questions kind of haunted me then for several years. Mm. Basically what happened is I forgot about it. I had a movie to make. I was, all my attention focus was to that. And sure. but this image of this truck going past and just narrowly missing me, and those three questions just kind of stayed with me. Right. And I couldn't get it out of my head. And I I guess, Danny, the way that I explore the world is through story. And I thought, well, possibly the best way to answer those three questions is to make a film about it. And so I started researching. I started researching intuition because I figured that's what that was. It was some form of intuition. And the more I researched intuition, the more confused I became because it seemed to be this kind of like thing, this sort of ethereal, amorphous kind of intangible thing that nobody really kind of put their finger on to satisfy my curiosity as to what actually happened to me at that moment,
Right.
So it took a long time of research before I felt comfortable enough to actually, proceed to go out and try and make the film.
Right. When you asked those questions, Bill, like right after the incident, a day or two after, what were you thinking? What were you saying to yourself about those questions?
It was really, really confusing, I got to say, Danny, because something happened, something that I couldn't explain, something that made no sense to me, and yet something that was absolutely real.
Right.
And later on, as I began to do more research, I realized that this was not something uncommon.
Right.
This sort of thing actually happens quite a lot.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't talk about it because they're too embarrassed or they dismiss it as being something, some sort of weird coincidence or, whatever.
Yeah. Some people would call it a miracle, huh?
Yeah. What's a miracle? A miracle is something that defies the forces of nature. Yeah.
I think so.
And that defied the forces of nature.
Doesn't make sense. I know.
Yeah.
So what did people like afterwards when you told people, because you said just now, a lot of times people won't speak about that because they feel embarrassed, weird, or what did you tell people after the incident, a week or so afterwards? Did you tell your friends and your wife, Jennifer?
I never did. Like I say, and Jennifer wasn't with me at the time in America. I think she was still back in Australia. And I had to fly back to Los Angeles to go into a really important casting session. We were right sort of at the throes of the commencement of photography of a $12 million thriller, and which I was producing as well as directing. So I was under a huge amount of pressure. And my whole focus then was, to try and make the best movie possible. And I forgot about it, and I didn't tell anybody about it. And then when it started coming back to me, that's when I told Jennifer about it. But I didn't tell anybody else because it seemed to be very personal, and it just seemed, I was kind of scared that people would laugh at me,
Right? Yeah.
And diminish it in some way, kind of belittling it by ridiculing me. And I felt that it was too important to ridicule, to dismiss. It was very private and very personal. And so I can understand why people, when this sort of thing happens, why people don't wish to talk about it, because it is intensely personal and intimate. But I tell you something, Danny, I cut forward to, like years and years later, and I make the movie, and I'm doing Q&As all across America. And at the end of the screening and the end of the Q&As, the number of people who came up to me afterwards and said, look, you know what, the same thing happened to me. And then they tell me their circumstances. And the circumstances are different, but basically, they're imperiled in some way on a voice, or there's some sort of intervention that steps in and saves their life. Now, at the Q&As that I did right across America, I would have probably 2 or 3 people after a screening come up and say the same thing, but tell me different stories. And each story was unique. And you look at these people and they think, they have no reason to tell me lies. They have no reason to kind of wait for a moment where they can, talk to me, try and burden me like this. And I listen to them, I look into their eyes, and then it's real. Yeah. And you know what? So many of them said afterwards, they said the film that you made validated their experience, and they thanked me for it. And this word came up time and time again. Thank you for validating the experience that I had. And I came away from the whole thing thinking, okay, so number one, this is not something, that happened to me that was some sort of quirk. this is something that happens to a lot of people, and it happens time and time again. And there's something going on. You know,
so
there's something going on.
Oh, there absolutely is. You and I both know that, and it's interesting, as you say. You know, when I share my story about my near death, you share yours. First thing is to say it's funny. It's not funny. There are many people that come up and say, "Hey, I had a similar experience. I know somebody that had a similar experience." When you set out to make the movie, what was your intention to make the movie? Was it to validate it for yourself? Just bring information to people? What was the intent?
The intent was a very personal one. Once again, the intent was for me to find out what the bloody hell happened.
Right.
Really, as simple as that.
Yeah.
I thought. There's got to be a story in this. You know, I'm a journalist by trade, as a journalist with the Australian Broadcasting Corporation before I moved into movies.
Sure.
You know, so I have that journalistic nose, for a story. And I thought, well, there's a good story in this, and I want to know. I want to know what happened and how it all works. And that was the thing really that drove me. But you know, my wife. And I got to say, Danny, you know, I started this off not a spiritual person at all, right?
Right. Yeah.
I came from a family where both my parents were dentists. There was never any conversation around the dinner table about spirituality or anything esoteric like that. My brother is a vet. My sister is a psychologist. And I started.
So God wasn't around then too much.
Myself. No, not at all. You know, and I started off doing medicine, and then I moved into journalism, and journalism only reinforced my thinking my rational side of my brain, if you like. You know, that everything has got to be fact proven and double checked and evidence based and so forth.
Right.
You know, so I went into this movie with that kind of mindset, but the one thing that I said to myself was, okay, look, if I'm going to do this film, I've got to keep an open mind. And the one thing that I didn't want to do in doing the film, Danny, was I didn't want to go out and make like a BBC knowledge documentary or Discovery Channel documentary or something like that, you know, where you got the pluses and the minuses and you've got these debates about people and all that sort of crap. You know, I didn't want to do that. You know, I wanted to keep an open mind. And the one thing that I imposed on myself was this: if I was going to make this film, then I had to make it intuitively. And what that meant was that, you know, unlike with all the other movies that I've made, I wasn't going to plan anything.
Right.
I was going to allow my intuition to guide me step by step through the making of the film.
Right. Yeah, no,
and that was terrifying.
No, I know, especially for somebody who's so structured and logical, right? Just to say, oh, let's make a film here, where you're investing millions of dollars to make this film. And it was really cool when I watched it. I mean, when you set out, you, and we'll tell everybody a little bit about the film. Who were the people that you set out and said, okay, if I have to go find out what that voice was, right? Where was it, and why did it save my life? How did you start to think, okay, I want to go talk to these types of people? And who were those people in the film?
Well, I ended up getting some of the top experts on intuition in the film, but Danny, I didn't know who these people were. I didn't know who James Van Praagh was. I didn't know who, you know, Lee Carroll, who channels for Cryon, is. I didn't know any of these people.
Yeah, Carroll.
So what happened was this.
I liked her a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't have a list of people that I was going to go to. I didn't know any of these people at all. But what happened was this, and this is a really weird thing. I tried for years and years to get this film going, and I struck out. You know, at every single turn, I struck out. I went to Cannes, I went to Toronto, I went to the film markets that I normally go to. I talked to one would back this project because there was no precedent for it, and the way I wanted to do it which was with absolute control.
Right.
And I didn't really know what I was doing. Right. I just said to them, look, I do treatments and stuff like this, but I said, look, it's going to be loose. It's going to be intuitive. No one really wanted to back me. I got to a point after several years where I really thought that this film wasn't going to happen. And I went to bed one night saying to myself, right, you've spent now, I think it was something like 7 years on this project, and you put a lot of money into it, a lot of development and so forth, of my own money. You got to make a decision in the morning as to whether or not you're going to give it one last shot or step away from it. Right. Anyway, during that night, I had this dream, this very, very clear dream in which I saw clearly how I was to make the film. That I had to make it immediately, that I had to do it with a tiny crew, that I had to pretty much nickel and dime it and not wait for the big budgets and the crew sizes that I was used to and so forth. But I just had to do it immediately, and I just had to start. Right. And so I wake up from this dream, like cliche, it's like boings, eyes open, there's a clear message right in front of me. This is the way I got to make the movie. Right. And I look across at the bedside table and it's 4:44, right? 4:44 in the morning. And I think that's weird. I've just had this very, very clear dream and it's 4:44 in the morning. So I grabbed my iPad and I Googled, what does 4:44 mean? And up came several entries. The first entry was by Doreen Virtue. And I remember, I'm paraphrasing now what I read, but it was something like this. 4:44 is a very powerful angelic number telling you that right at this moment you are surrounded by your spirit guides, your masters, your angels, and your archangels. They are acknowledging that you've been doing good work, and they're urging you to move forward, and that if you trust your inner guidance and your intuition, they will back you and protect you and help guide you to great success. Wow. Okay, so I've just read this, right? Yeah. At 4:44 in the morning. Yeah. I'm lying there in bed and thinking, what the bloody hell do I do? Do I believe this? Yeah. Do I, I've just had the dream. I've woken up at 4:44. I've read this. What do I do? And I didn't believe in angels, right? At that stage, I didn't believe in angels or spirit.
We're going to talk about that in a moment.
Yeah, and I just, but here's the thing, Daddy, and this is a really scary thing. At that moment, I realized that this wasn't a decision as to whether or not I should move forward to do the film as the dream had said I should do it. I had the very strong sense that I was on the precipice of making a life change. That if I was to do this, then I would end up going to a place that I could not return from. I would become a different person to the person that I was. So, and I was aware of this lying in bed at that moment. That if I followed this directive from the dream and from what this 4:44 meant, then I was going to go to a whole other place as a person. And did I want to do that? Right, yeah. Anyway, so I figured...
epiphany happening, huh?
Yeah. Or, I figured, look, this is too weird. This is too strange. I had the voice, and I listened to that voice in the car, and it saved my life. I've got to follow this. So I went back to sleep, and then I woke up later that morning, and I went out and I bought camera and lighting gear and sound gear. I booked 2 tickets to India, myself and my wife, and I decided that I'd just lob into India with all this equipment and start to make the film. And that's how it started.
Wow, that is cool. I love it. I looked up the definition of intuition. I mentioned the name of the film, Intuition, Personal Guidance System, in our intro. But it's defined as the ability to understand something unconditionally without the need for conscious reasoning. And I thought that was pretty interesting. And that sounds almost like what happened with you.
Yeah, well, you see, I read these similar definitions, and I wasn't happy with any of them
Mm-hmm.
because it didn't really nail what happened to me.
Yeah.
And the more I learned about intuition, the more I realized that these various definitions that people had,
Mm-hmm.
covered one aspect of intuition, but not the whole gamut of intuition.
Right.
And so I came up with my own definition, and
Uh-huh.
it took me many years to come up with my own definition, and that is intuition is a sudden, unexplained insight that comes unaided by logic, intellect, or expertise.
Mm.
Intuition is a sudden, unexplained insight that comes unaided by logic, intellect, or expertise.
Mm.
Now, that was a definition that I forged because I wasn't happy with any of the definitions
Right.
that
I like
I
that.
was reading.
I remember that one in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you look at every word, it comes suddenly.
Yeah.
Intuition is a sudden, unexplained insight that comes unaided. Every single word in that definition, I really gave a great deal of thought to. And that kind of satisfies me in my need to kind of find an order to something that basically is hard to put into order. Intuition is hard to categorize.
Yeah. How did making the movie and experiencing the people that you talked with, how did that change your life?
Well, it didn't at first. I mean, number one, it took 3 years to film, and I traveled around the world several times and following my intuition and so forth. And when I started off, I had this sort of dispassionate, keeping an open mind, but this dispassionate kind of distance, from the people that I was interviewing. But then gradually, I started to meet people that just knocked me sideways, and things started to happen, that were inexplicable, like that voice.
Yeah.
And there was a turning point, I got to say. There was one turning point that something happened where it just changed everything. And from that time on, I then started to take it. I then began to sort of transform. Should I tell you what it was?
Yeah, please.
All right. Before filming, I walk Caminos, these pilgrimage routes. Before I started filming, I walked the Camino De Santiago,
right?
And that was kind of that opened me up to accepting stuff that came later.
Yeah. And why did you walk that? Because that's somewhat of a spiritual pilgrimage, right? For people that don't know, the El Camino, and you walked how many kilometers?
800 kilometers, 500 miles. Yeah.
Yeah. 30 some days, right?
That's right. Yeah. And I'm not a religious person, and I didn't do it as a spiritual kind of thing. In fact, I didn't really know why I was walking the Camino. This was 1 year before I started filming, before I had that dream, by the way.
Right.
In fact, nine months before I had the dream.
So what was the inspiration? And, what was the catalyst for you to go walk El Camino? You just woke up one day and said, I'm going to go walk it?
I'd been in Spain several years earlier, as part of my daughter was living there, and so my wife and I went over and visited her. And as it turned out where we lived was very close to the Camino, and I saw all these pilgrims walking past, and I thought, they're nuts. These people are stupid. Right? What a futile, meaningless thing to do, to go tramping across bloody Spain.
Yeah, right.
And the more I looked at these people, the more I became like obsessed with them. It was like I was sort of like an anthropologist, like looking at a tribe that just walked out of the woods or
the Amazon or something,
primitive jungle.
Yeah.
And I became really quite intrigued by by the Camino, and then I started training for it. And I've written this book. Once I did the Camino, I wrote a book called The Way My Way, which details all of this.
Yeah, that's a wonderful book, by the way. If anybody has any interest in the Camino, great book. Yeah, I read it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, but anyway, so I then walked the Portuguese Camino, and I developed a very bad cough, and the cough didn't go away. And I went to doctors, and I had antibiotics, and I had X-rays and stuff like that, and nothing could shift this cough. And I had the cough for, almost a year, and it was getting worse and worse. Anyway, I had picked up some medication in Europe, some herbal medication, which basically stopped me coughing for a period of time, for 2 or 3 hours or so, but never fixed it. Anyway, so my intuition had led me to this bloke called Michael Tamura, who lived in Mount Shasta, which is a very sacred and holy part of North America, Northern California. And I was told that he was somebody who knew all about intuition. He was a psychic healer, and that, that I should go and talk to him, interview him on film. Anyway, as part of this whole thing of following my intuition, I didn't know who he was or how legit he was or anything, but I just logged up and, so the night before I was due to do this interview with him, I got into a coughing fit. At like 12 o'clock at night. I woke up and I was coughing and coughing and coughing. I put the sheet over my mouth, to sort of help myself. I took some of that medication stuff and went back to sleep. In the morning I woke up and there's blood all over the sheet.
Oh man.
Where I'd coughed. I'd coughed up blood. Anyway, so I had to do the interview at 9 o'clock in the morning with Michael. I took another tablet so that, I was absolutely fine. I get to the doorway and he takes one look at me and he says, "You need healing, buddy." And he sits me down, and I won't go through all of the detail, but basically I went through about a 20 to 30-minute process where he went back through my past lives. And I'll give you an example. He said, in one past life, you were an agitator in a small village in England, and you were agitating against the church, and the church people put you in stocks in the village square, and they cut your throat so that you would bleed out slowly, as an example to other people in the village not to knock the church.
Sure. And
he said, "Do you want me to heal you?" I went, "Sure." So he moves his hands and goes into this kind of like zone thing, and he goes like this. And anyway, cut to the chase. Yeah. That afternoon, I do the interview. The interview is great. Michael Tamura is fantastic, and he ends up becoming a friend of mine. And that afternoon, I realized I hadn't coughed for several hours. And then that evening, I still hadn't coughed. And the cameraman who was traveling with us, who'd seen me coughing pretty much consistently all through the shoot up to that point, he said, "Bill, you're not coughing anymore." And pretty much, Danny, I haven't coughed since.
Yeah.
That chronic cough went away, and it stayed away. And Michael healed me. He healed me through this psychic method that he did.
Yeah.
And I talked to him about it later, and I said, "What happened there?" And he said, "Well, I was instructed to heal you as an example because you're going to be a communicator, and you're going to tell people about this. So to build awareness that this sort of thing works."
Yeah.
And all I can say is that it worked on me. All of the medication, all the antibiotics, all of the medical interventions, none of that worked. But that 20, 30 minutes with Michael fixed me up totally.
Wow.
And that was like a major turning point for me. Major turning point.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet. When you said we spoke about earlier about angels, and I said I'll get back to that. There was a point in the movie, I think you were talking with Carolyn Miss. That's her name, the woman's name? Is that right?
Yeah. Carolyn Mace, yeah.
Yeah, and you said something about angels, and you asked if there were some. And then her exchange, you remember that exchange where you might even have said, did I offend you or something? You
Oh
remember
yeah.
that? What was that about?
What I said to her, Danny, what I said to her is, I said, "Are angels useful?"
Yes.
Now, anybody who knows Carolyn Mays, and she's an absolute, I mean, she's a brilliant woman,
Yeah.
a brilliant woman, an orator and a theologian, but she takes no prisoners.
Yes.
And like she's an absolute bull biter.
Yeah, she is. That's what I
And
liked about her.
oh yeah. And and now in retrospect, knowing Carolyn as I do now,
Yeah.
When I think back, do I ask Carolyn Mays, are angels useful?
Mm-hmm.
My God, it's like a shotgun blast right in the face.
Yeah. I don't think you do that again. But when that struck me, and it did strike me because I had an incident, and as I watched your movie, it really brought, and I watched it several times with some different people. It really brought back for me, and I would even encourage anybody listening right now, were there instances in your life where somebody showed up and you never saw them again, and you may have reflected to go, what the bloody hell was that all about, as you would say? And I recall when I was in the Outer Banks of North Carolina after a real bad accident, and I was at the end of my proverbial rope, and I was looking to buy a hose that I was going to put into the tailpipe of my Jeep and then just asphyxiate. I was at that dark place. And I was in this small hardware store in the Outer Banks of North Carolina at the end of the season. And as I'm contemplating these hoses, like, which one should I buy? What colors? The craziest things you're thinking about, right? And this woman walked by, and I don't even remember what she said, small, maybe in her 70s, very happy and cheerful. And she just kind of shocked me out of my thought. And, I went about that day. Then I said, I can't do this. I'm not going to buy the hose. And I did the next best thing. I went out and got drunk. As I reflected on that over time now, I'm telling you, man, I'm pretty much 100% convinced that God just, when he was having his coffee break, up in heaven with all the angels and giving them all their to-dos for the day, he must have said to this one, hey, listen, the hardware store in North Carolina, hose aisle, go make sure Danny doesn't buy the hose. So I 100% believe that they are there for sure.
Danny, it's interesting you say that, mate, because, I said before I didn't believe in angels. I certainly do now. Mm-hmm. And like you, I believe that angels don't present necessarily, with wings and with an ethereal glow. They're the homeless man that sort of shuffles past and mumbles something, and you go, okay, yes. Right, now I understand. It's that kind of ordinariness, that which is the arena within which angels work, I believe. Yeah. But I want to put something else to you.
What's that?
I want to put something else to you.
Sure.
And that is this, and that's the possibility that we could be angels for somebody else or for other people. That without us even realizing it, that we could be the conduit for an angelic intervention, if you like. Mm-hmm. In other words, we could be angels just momentarily without us even realizing it, and we can change somebody's life and walk on.
Oh, I think so, Bill.
And have absolutely no concept of the impact that we've had on that person.
Right.
Right.
Oh, I do.
I really believe that.
For me, the way that it shows up for me is the Holy Spirit is very, very strong sense of support for me. I practice Catholic. That's my structure. And, the Holy Spirit, which I believe is in all of us, is just a big part of my approach to life. And so often I'll call on the Spirit just to work through me, because I don't know what the hell to say to somebody, right, that may have just lost their teenage kid. But let the Spirit just work through me, as you said, to perhaps be somewhat of an angel to them during that time. I think it's very, very not even possible. I think it's very, very alive in our world.
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think intuition, does everybody have it? Does everybody experience those, sudden insights as you define it?
Yeah, everybody has intuition. And one of the things that I propose in the film is that it is a system, a legitimate system that we have in our body, just like our circulatory system, our nervous system, our digestive system, and so forth. Mm-hmm. It's just that it works energetically. And so that's why science refuses to acknowledge it. But the film details how it works in conjunction with the energetic chakra points in your body, which also work with your major glandular and hormonal points in your body, and so forth.
Yeah.
The film proposed, and I proposed, that it is an absolutely legitimate system that we all have, we're all born with. Its primary function is to keep us alive, and its secondary function is to guide us through life. I think most people don't, I think a lot of people anyway, don't acknowledge that intuition exists.
Right.
They don't acknowledge that intuition exists.
Yeah.
Or if they do acknowledge it exists, then they don't trust it. And they don't follow through with it.
Right.
It's a system that we all is available to all of us to use.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of people get to a point in their life where they have acted rationally. They've followed the path of this is the best thing to do. This is what common sense says I should do. This is what my family or my spouse or my friends think I should do.
Sure.
They haven't followed their intuitive path, their heart, if you like. And they get to a point in their life and they turn around and they wonder why they're so unhappy.
Yeah.
It's because they haven't stayed on the path that that was laid out for them at birth.
So that intuition and that system that we have, is that then the connection, right? The ability for that system to connect with our angels and our guides and all our spirits?
Yeah.
That's what I think too.
Danny, here's the thing, mate. When I was really sort of studying intuition and trying to work it out and trying to make sense of it, because I did find it very confusing. I mean, one of the things that confused me was that people would use intuition and instinct interchangeably, and they're two totally different things.
Right.
Instinct and intuition are two totally different things, but people use these. This is how confusing it is. And so over a long period of time, I came to the conclusion that there are four categories of intuition. And I'll run through them very quickly. There's survival intuition, which is an intuition that comes from the body and a heightened sensory perception.
Right.
Mother's intuition, where a mother intuitively knows that her child is in danger, is a form of survival intuition. There's the second part is cognitive intuition, which is intuition based on expert knowledge. So you see CEOs say, I made a gut decision on something.
Right.
Or you see elite sportsmen saying, I was in the zone. I didn't drive that F1 motor car. That car drove me. I had no control on them. And they win the Grand Prix and whatever. This is intuition based on expert knowledge. What I call subsume memory recall, where the expert knowledge is so deeply embedded in the person, they don't even realize that they're calling forth that knowledge.
Right.
The third type of intuition is what I call mystical intuition, which is what happened to me. Inexplicable, it's mystical. It's the connection to the God force, the Godhead, as you mentioned. The fourth type of intuition is a type of intuition which I think is also mystical, and that's what I call proxy intuition. That's where intuition, for whatever reason, you might be blocked getting an intuitive hit, and somebody comes up to you and says, Danny, I don't think you should catch that plane this afternoon, mate. I don't know why, but please don't get on that plane. And so you don't get on that plane, and then the plane crashes.
That's interesting. It's intuition from somebody else because we're not open.
It's intuition from somebody else. Yeah, but also proxy intuition can happen through circumstance. You know, for instance, there are plenty of instances at 9/11 where people missed the bus, you know, that would have taken them to the towers and they would have died, you know, or the taxi didn't turn up on time.
Right.
So proxy intuition, in fact, can happen through not only through a person, but also through circumstances. And once again, I think this is a mystical connection.
Yeah.
You know, so of the 4 types of intuition, what I'm saying is that two types can be proven by science, if you like.
Yeah.
And can be deemed to be a rational, logical form of intuition. And 2 types are mystical that can't be proven by science.
Yeah.
And yet intuitive nonetheless.
Yeah, I like it.
It's pretty cool. Huh? I mean, once I figured that out, once I sort of worked through that, then a whole lot of stuff made sense to me.
Oh yeah, no, I like the way you explain it. As I said, I recommend. I've recommended the movie to quite a few people. I think it's just wonderful, and I'll continue to recommend it. You said that there's 5 steps to tap into it. Maybe we can talk about that as we kind of start to wrap up. If people are listening and they go, okay, yeah, I experienced this a little bit. It sounds kind of weird, and yeah, I don't want to talk about it as much. But they do want to tap into it more as they continue on this journey of life. What are those 5 steps to tap into it that you came up with that I think are brilliant?
I detail in the film 5 steps to access your intuition. Stop, listen, ask, trust, follow. Right. So first you've got to stop. And by stop, I mean, get rid of all the distractions. You know, it could mean going into a form of meditation. It could just mean taking a walk in a park or sitting by the beach somewhere. So stop. You've got to stop because intuitive impulses are coming all the time. Right. But if you're so busy and your mind's going so fast, you're not receptive to them.
Right. So put the phone down. Then you've got to listen. Put the phone down, relax, shut it out.
Exactly. I mean, a good time to get your intuitive impulses for me is in the shower.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm still in that kind of half sleep state.
Yes.
You got all this warm water hitting you. Yeah. I make sure that I turn off the radio so I don't have the radio on when I'm in the shower. Right. And so much intuition comes to me in the shower. So that's a point of stopping.
Yeah.
You got to listen. So you stop, then you got to listen. The third one is you've got to ask. And this is a big one because your guides and your angels and your intuitive self is eager to help you, but you've got to ask. A lot of people don't realize. Like, for instance, that whole thing, you know, when I told you about, you know, going to sleep and saying, I've got to make a decision in the morning.
Right.
You know, about the movie. I didn't realize it, but I was actually asking.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and then the answer.
Yeah, I that's great. That's something for me as I'm thinking right now that I need to do more, you know, because I do pray, I stop, I meditate, I look to open up and let the spirit show up. I don't necessarily ask for guidance on things that I'm working on in my life or outcomes that I'm shooting for. So, yeah, thank you for that, Bill. I'll start to ask a little bit more.
Yeah, we don't sort of like to ask, you know, because we we don't kind of like to sort of like put ourselves out there. But the more I read, the more I talk to people who know more than me, the more they tell me that asking is a very, very critical part of this whole function. Stop, listen, ask, trust. When the guidance comes in, you've then got to trust it.
I love it.
And you've got to go, no, this is not coincidence. This is not synchronicity. This, you know, I've got to trust this, and I've got to go with it. And that's a stopping point for a whole lot of people. They don't trust it.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
the guidance comes in.
Yeah. You and I talked, and in my, you know, my 4th book, Taking the Shit Out of the Show, I write in one chapter about, you know, our words. And you and I have talked about, you know, hope versus trust. And when I'm working with people, you know, coaching or whatever, and they're talking about hoping that something is going to work out, right? Whether it's business, relationships, you know, health, getting, and I'll just take it. I'll say to them, listen, take hope out of that sentence and replace it with trust and see how you feel. So now I trust this versus I hope this. I trust I trust. And it really has a shift for people in their energy. And perhaps that shift in energy is just allowing our guides to support us. Hope is to want something. I like definitions. I always try to get my head around them. Hope is to want something to happen. Trust is to have a firm belief in the reliability of something or some person. And for me, that firm belief is just, that's good. So I love that. I love that word trust.
Well, allied to the word trust is surrender. Mm-hmm. And surrender is a tough one for a lot of people. It was very tough for me early on. Mm. Where part of trust is surrendering to what will come. Mm-hmm. And part of this as well, Danny, and we've talked about this in the past as well, privately, is trusting in divine timing. Your timing may not be the same as divine timing, the timing of spirit, the timing of your guidance. Mm-hmm. And this is where you got to surrender. You and I are both impatient people. We like to get on with things.
Yes.
And and so surrendering to divine timing is a biggie. There are big life lessons in that one.
Yeah.
The last one is follow. You can go through all this stuff, you can trust and whatever, and you go, right, yep, absolutely. I trust that this is the right thing for me to do at this time. But then you don't do it. And you don't do it because you're scared. And this is where fear comes in.
Yes.
Fear comes in at that last blockage of stopping you from following the guidance that you have received, you've asked for, it's come, you trust that it's legitimate, you trust that it's the right thing, the timing is right, but you don't follow it. Yeah. And so many people fall at that last one. They don't follow. And logic kicks in and fear kicks in and they revert to what's safe.
Yep.
Yes. You see,
yes. Guilty as charged, my friend. Guilty as charged.
Yola. Logic and rational thinking contracts. Mm-hmm. Intuition expands. Mm. And the universe is expanding.
I love that.
Everything is expanding. I mean, I'm expanding.
Logic, what did you say? Say that again, Bill. Logic contracts.
Logic and rationale contract.
Right.
And intuition expands. Logic works with what's known. Mm-hmm. Intuition works with what's not known. Mm. And it works with not only what's not known or unknown, but it works with the unknowable, what can never be known. Mm. And we're terrified of that.
Yeah,
sure. We're terrified of stepping into that territory of the unknowable.
Mm. Yeah.
And so we revert to what's known, to precedent, to what's worked before.
Yep.
And that's why we live contracted, stunted lives, because we haven't expanded.
Yeah. Yeah. Growth lives in uncertainty, I think, right? Growth is out there beyond. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I like it. So you got, you're working on another film and it's about fear, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So give us a quick kind of 1 minute trailer to what we can expect when that's finished.
Well, I say that I look at fear biologically, psychologically, culturally, and spiritually. Mm. So I got Dr. Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, Lee Carroll Mace again. I've got some really big names in the movie.
Yes, you do.
Basically, it's called Facing Fear, and it looks at how fear works, why it works, and how we can use fear ultimately for our betterment.
I like that. I'll look forward to that one. I will look forward for sure. So, Bill, I've certainly enjoyed our time together here. And as we wrap up, and you'll probably pull something out of the conversations here. If you're with somebody having a cup of coffee or a pint of beer or whatever it might be, and we'll never see that person again, and they say, Bill, what are two or three things that I must take with me in life, that I must stay aware of and conscious of? What would you advise me, Bill? 2 or 3 things to stay aware of.
Well, one of the things would be first thought, best thought. Mm-hmm. Your first thought is your best thought. Mm-hmm. It's your intuitive thought. Mm-hmm. And but what happens is we don't trust our first thought. Right. We go, oh, that's a crazy idea. I'm not going to do that.
Right. Yeah.
But if you can operate your life on first thought, best thought, and run with that, your life will change.
I like that. I like it. Anything else?
Stay away from cryptocurrency.
Cheers, mate. Hey, listen, where can people tell them where they can go see the movie? Where can they go find you and kind of get connected to you?
Look, I'm not terribly good at marketing myself, Danny, so I'm very appreciative of this interview. So thank you. My Camino book is on Amazon. If they just go to my name, Bill Bennett, don't confuse me with the conservative American politician.
Yes.
The book is called The Way, My Way. I've got a website, billbennett.com.au for Australia. Mm-hmm. That pretty much has everything there.
That is great.
And PGS, the movie, is available on iTunes and Google Play.
Right. And I would recommend to anybody out there.
PGS, the movie.
Yeah, I would recommend strongly to everybody to watch that movie. It is it's powerful, and certainly gets you reflecting on your life and the experiences you've had, and I think opens you up as you move forward to life to leverage this beautiful thing called intuition. So, Bill, I look forward to our paths crossing in person, and we're not thousands of miles away at some point. I wish you all the best with this new film, and I certainly appreciate you being on our show.
Thank you, Danny. It's been good fun. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody, thanks for listening to our Back to Life podcast. Go ahead and share, comment, like it, offer it up to some of your friends. And, until next time, just focus on 2 things. What are you up to creating in your life, and how are you going about doing that? Because we need a lot of fulfillment in our life. That's what we're here for. So until next time, take care. Well, I told you that was going to be an interesting episode, and I'm sure our conversation between Bill and I got you thinking about some things. There's no question that any of you that follow me and listen, there's no question that there's something bigger than us going on here. I call it God and look to connect to the Holy Spirit. You may call it something else or have some other practices. I think it's just interesting, as Bill spoke to all of these experts from all different disciplines, really, that they all agree that there is an energy available to us that wants the best for us, and it's here to guide us. And that we really need to slow down and tap into it. I often say that the spirit resides in stillness. So I was happy to bring you Bill Bennett. I would recommend that you go and grab some of his books, check out his website, watch that documentary, Intuition. And until next time, just focus on your own inspiration and your fulfillment and your resilience, because after all, that's what we're here for. So go ahead, like, comment, and share this if you think somebody else would get some value out of it. And always wishing you the best in your days ahead. Peace.